Speaker, it goes without saying that all the work that we do here in the National Assembly is important, for the Constitution provides that the House is the primary entity in which the sovereignty of the people is exercised. Despite the unquestionable importance of our work here in the Assembly, however, much of this work is the routine business of government. We legislate mostly incrementally. We respond to routine developments and endeavor to keep the legal framework of our country in step with contemporary standards, practices, norms, and expectations. Even when we bring brand new legislation to this House to implement novel policies, there are many times an air of normality and of continuity along a linear path of development. Once in a while, Mr. Speaker, there comes a time, perhaps no more than once or twice in a generation, once in a while, there comes a time when there is laid in this august assembly a bill that is so fundamental in importance and exceptional in nature that it takes its place among the seminal developments in the history of our country. It will be no exaggeration, Mr. Speaker, to say that this bill is such a bill. This bill is such a bill, Mr. Speaker, because it says henceforth it will be the law of this land that Guyanese must participate in and benefit from the exploitation of what has proven to be one of the most significant oil discoveries on the entire planet in contemporary times. I reiterate, Mr. Speaker, that henceforth this will be our law. It will not be our wish, it will not be merely policy, neither will it be hope or dream. It will be law. Guyanese individuals and firms will be conferred with legally enforceable rights of participation in this lucrative economic sector. Those who operate oil and gas concessions will come under a legal obligation to set aside business and employment for Guyanese nationals. This bill therefore delivers the framework for the total transformation of our economy, which will help to catapult us into the ranks of the developed world. It is a landmark bill, a game changer, a truly exceptional opportunity to shape the course of our history. And it's for this reason, Mr. Speaker, that I am disappointed that our friends on the other side of this House appear to be taking a very ordinary approach to what is in reality an extremely extraordinary development. Instead of rising to the occasion, we have the same old, same old. Oppose, for the record, perfunctory criticism, facile amendments offered. Mr. Speaker, I wish to deal with some specifics of this bill to demonstrate this transformative impact of which we on this side speak. As my colleagues before me have noted, we have in this bill provided for local content obligations in 40 distinct sectors and subsectors. Of these 40 sectors, there are 26 for which minimum local content obligation is 50% or more. There are 20 sectors for which the obligation is 75% or more. 13 sectors at 90% or more local participation, and in 4 sectors, the provision is 100%. That is to say, these are reserved exclusively for Guyanese. By any stretch of the imagination, Mr. Speaker, in the context of an economy that is the fastest growing economy in the world, this bill, with these provisions, must be recognized as significant, consequential, and impactful. Hundreds of Guyanese businesses have the opportunity to access markets that just did not exist for them before in a meaningful way, and thousands of these citizens will have access to employment opportunities. And this access comes at a time when the prospects are extraordinary by any conceivable standard. Mr. Speaker, to put these developments into perspective, we may recall not so long ago The conventional wisdom was that our economy needed to sustain a growth of 6 or 7% per year over a period of about 2 decades in order for us to achieve an acceptable standard of development. 6 or 7%. Last year, even in the stultifying strangleholds of the COVID 19 pandemic and the stagnation brought to our nation for almost half a year by the election fiasco, our economy grew by 43%. This year, we are on track to grow at almost 20%. And so, Mr. Speaker, even the perennial professional pessimists on the other side of this House must admit that the once seemingly elusive 6 or 7% on which economic transformation was premised now seems eminently feasible and achievable. In other words, Mr. Speaker, that future we dreamed of not so long ago is here today. It is here now. And it is within the future of now that we bring this historic bill to this House for the benefit of our people. Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that this bill is aimed at the oil and gas sector in its provisions, these benefits that we speak of will not be limited to that sector. While all eyes may be firmly set on the opportunities within the sector, which has obviously generated a direct consequence of enacting this bill, there is another equally important potential effect of this bill. That effect, Mr. Speaker, is the potential of our firms to use the foothold provided by the oil and gas sector to become established, to grow, and to develop into truly competitive entities in regional and global markets. This is possible because some of the sectors earmarked are readily amenable to being developed into vibrant export-oriented sectors to serve industries outside of the petroleum industry and companies outside of Guyana. I speak here particularly of sectors such as engineering and machining, accounting and legal services, environmental studies and services, among others. These and other sectors promise viability beyond the petrol-driven expansion. The provision for these sectors in this bill is manifest evidence of our government's commitment to sustainability in the post-petroleum economy and of our foresight in providing for future generations. To continue with specifics, Mr. Speaker, despite its brevity, this is a holistic and comprehensive bill, for its benefits are not aimed only at the level of the firm. This bill, once enacted, will directly impact hundreds, if not thousands, of Guyanese because it also imposes obligations on licensees, contractors, and subcontractors to give first preference to qualified Guyanese nationals for direct hiring. Moreover, it does not allow these companies to simply throw up their hands and claim that Guyanese are not qualified or experienced. Instead, in the event of lack of Guyanese possessing the skills and necessary experience in the areas that the local content obligation exists, it requires these companies to make provisions for training Guyanese to fill the available positions, for them to work alongside foreign nationals for periods to be approved by the minister until the experience deficit is overcome. Mr. Speaker, we do not only impose the obligations on the operators in the sector, the bill also has comprehensive arrangements for scrutiny and monitoring of compliance with its provisions in order for us to ensure that we meet the intended objectives of direct benefit to Guyanese workers and firms. It makes provision for a well-defined framework within which companies must give timely notice to the public of impending procurement and employment needs so as to enable locals to make plans and preparations to supply the market. There is a rigorous regime of reporting that will allow for monitoring of compliance with requirements and commitments. And last but not least, in order to give teeth to these measures, there are provisions for consequential financial penalties for non-compliance. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to say a few words on some of the amendments that have been proffered by our friends on the other side of the House. Mr. Speaker, I must say that despite acquiescing to a few of the proffered amendments, we are in general quite disappointed at what appears to be a lack of effort on the whole put into them by the honorable members of the other side. For example, Mr. Speaker, the proposed amendment to the first schedule, which seeks to provide for extremely high levels of local content right off the bat, seems calculated simply to pander to populism with no regard for the economic consequences to local consumers. One does not need to be an economist, Mr. Speaker, to understand the unacceptably high risk of imminent harm and injury to consumers from immediately setting local content obligations at the level proposed by the opposition. Mr. Speaker, the likely result of such actions especially would be for all or substantially all of available supply of goods and services in those areas to be directed to the oil and gas sector, leading to escalating prices for Guyanese consumers. It is already becoming difficult to find construction workers. The price of accommodation is increasing, thus we as a government have to be careful to manage the transition to avoid dislocation in the local economy. Our friends on the other side of this House, Honorable House, cannot have it both ways, Mr. Speaker. They cannot want to make political hay over price increases, yet come to this very House and propose inherently inflationary measures. For us to acquiesce to such measures would be the height of irresponsibility. Another proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker, with which we would fundamentally disagree is that which seeks to restrict local content to people who are Guyanese by birth only. My Honorable AG, Attorney General, have alluded to the unconstitutionality of these provisions. But Mr. Speaker, we have a fundamental difference in principles with our friends on the other side on this matter, as it would create a moral quagmire that a second class of citizens, and indeed it would literally create second-class citizens, something which our government, committed as we are to inclusiveness, are unable to countenance, much less support. And Mr. Speaker, in passing, some of my other colleagues have noted on other occasions that sometimes we get the feeling that the opposition would like us to pretend that the years 2015 to 2020 simply never happened. We hear, for example, that our immigration laws are loose, and there are possibilities of corrupt practices in the naturalization process. But this is coming to us from a party which created an entire dedicated ministry for citizenship and operated it for 5 years. Now you are indicting your own system. It is difficult to square that history with the present claim that we have systems so weak to such an extent that it merits creating second-class citizenship, which will have the effect of excluding some Guyanese from participating in our economy. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I wish to remind the members on the other side, and indeed all Guyana, that the first announcement of finding high-quality oil in commercial quantities offshore Guyana was made on the 20th of May, 2015, a mere 4 days into the term of the office of the APNU-AFC coalition. 4 days, Mr. Speaker, 4 days. But if we listen to our friends on the other side of this House, you will be excused for thinking that that announcement was made 4 years after, leaving them with no time to do anything about it. The reality is that after that signal announcement was made known to Guyana and the world, the coalition had an entire 5 years and then some. Those were years, Mr. Speaker, in which if they were really serious and committed to the development of the people, they had ample time and opportunity to do something about it. In those 5 years, Mr. Speaker, we heard a lot of talk about local content, and we saw no action, no implementation, because there was no commitment from those who now cry tears for local content. We, on the other hand, have brought this bill to this floor of this assembly well within 2 years of coming to office. 16 months, in fact. Within 16 months of coming into office, we have moved, enshrined to law, the right of participation for all Guyanese in this oil and gas economy. I wish to repeat, Mr. Speaker, our commitment to be enshrined in law is for the right of participation to be conferred on all Guyanese. This is best exemplified by the obligation in Schedule 2 of the bill, which mandates companies to ensure, and I quote, equal treatment and opportunity afforded to all Guyanese nationals, irrespective of race, political opinions, color, creed, age, disability, marital status, sex, gender, language, birth, social class, pregnancy, religious, conscience, belief, or culture, or geographical location in Guyana. And I end quote. So there is no doubt our commitment is to all Guyana. Those who doubt our commitment to one Guyana need look no further than the provisions of this bill. And if in doubt about the alternative on offer, they can scour the Hansard to see what commitment to local content was offered by our friends on the other side in the 5 years that they occupied the government benches. Mr. Speaker, I am conscious of the weight of responsibility that is on all of our shoulders with the advent of this historic and momentous bill. I support it wholeheartedly. I recommend it unreservedly to this honorable House.